When you were in that relationship, the narcissist truly believed they had you figured out. They believed they knew exactly how much they could take from you, how much they could push, how often they could dismiss you, invalidate you, or disappear without you ever leaving or waking up. They built their entire strategy around the assumption that you would stay confused, self-doubting, and emotionally tethered to their approval. That assumption is where they messed up. Because what narcissistic individuals consistently underestimate is your capacity for awareness. They don't account for the moment when the fog lifts. They don't plan for the day you stop explaining yourself, stop trying to prove your worth, and stop chasing closure. They assume that because they once had control, they will always have it. And that is a dangerous miscalculation. At first, your change may have been subtle. You questioned things internally. You noticed patterns instead of isolated incidents. You felt that quiet discomfort that told you something wasn't right, even when you couldn't yet put words to it. From the outside, the narcissist may not have noticed much at all, but internally, something had shifted, and that shift is irreversible. The narcissist depends on your emotional engagement, your reactions, your attempts to fix things, your desire to be understood. These are the mechanisms that keep them in power. When you begin to detach emotionally, when your reactions soften or disappear, it destabilizes them. They may not immediately understand why, but they feel it. The dynamic no longer works the way it used to. And here's the critical part. They didn't expect you to grow. Narcissistic individuals freeze people in time. They see you as a role, not a person, the empath, the caretaker, the apologizer, the one who absorbs blame. When you step outside that role, it creates cognitive dissonance for them. Their internal script breaks. They may respond with confusion at first, then irritation, then escalation, more baiting, more criticism, more subtle cruelty. This isn't because you're doing something wrong. It's because they're trying to reestablish the version of you they could control. But every time you don't take the bait, every time you don't collapse back into self-doubt, they register it as a loss. What truly unnerves them is not your anger, not even your confrontation. It's your clarity. Clarity removes leverage. When you understand what's happening, you stop personalizing their behavior. You stop believing their projections. You stop trying to earn basic respect. And once that happens, the narcissist realizes something very unsettling. You are no longer predictable. That's when regret enters. Not healthy regret, not remorse, but recognition. Recognition that they pushed too far, that they underestimated your limits, that they assumed you would tolerate what you no longer tolerate. They may never articulate this, but it shows up in their behavior. The sudden confusion, the shifting tone, the strange mix of hostility and pullback. They expected you to stay stuck. Instead, you became observant. You became discerning. You became less emotionally accessible. And that threatens the entire structure of their sense of superiority. Because if you can see them clearly, then they are no longer in control of the narrative. This is why you often see narcissistic individuals become most reactive not when you're emotional, but when you're calm. Calm signals independence. Calm tells them you no longer need their validation. And in that moment, they realize the truth. They didn't just lose influence, they created the conditions for their own loss. So, if you've ever wondered whether they know they treated you badly, understand this. The moment you stopped bending, stopped shrinking, and started seeing clearly, that's when they knew they misjudged you. And that awareness is something they can never take back. What narcissists regret the most is not that they hurt you, and it's not even that they were cruel or unfair. What they truly regret is losing control over you, because control is the currency they operate in. It's the mechanism that feeds their self-esteem, their sense of power, their ability to bend reality in their favor. And when that control is gone, suddenly they feel vulnerable in ways they are not equipped to handle. Think about it. In the early stages, they might have seemed charming, attentive, even generous. But it was never really about care or mutual respect. It was about establishing a pattern where you would follow their lead, adapt to their whims, and tolerate behaviors that you might not have accepted from anyone else. Every criticism, every subtle manipulation, every emotional withdrawal was carefully calibrated to see how far they could push you, and how much you would comply without question. They assume that their control was permanent, that they had mapped your limits perfectly. Predictability of someone who no longer mirrors their control. And in that unpredictability, they are confronted with their own limitations. You may notice that once you stop seeking their approval, stop arguing to be seen or understood, and stop allowing them to dictate your emotional responses, they become increasingly frantic. That's because their sense of power is not just challenged, it's eroded. They might try to reinsert themselves into your life with gifts, apologies, or even guilt-laden messages. But none of it is about reconciliation. It's about reclaiming the influence they've lost. They don't care if you forgive them. They care if they can once again manipulate your thoughts, your feelings, your sense of reality. And the truth is, they will never fully admit it, but they know it. They know the moment they pushed too far, misread your resilience, and underestimated your capacity to detach. They know that their reign over your emotions has ended, and that awareness is a quiet, gnawing frustration for them. No amount of charm, manipulation, or persuasion can replace the fact that you are no longer a captive audience to their whims. So understand this, their regret is not moral, it is strategic. It is rooted in the loss of control, the recognition that the game they thought they were winning has shifted, and that you, the person they sought to dominate, have emerged not only unbroken but empowered. And in the end, the greatest proof of their miscalculation is the freedom you carry with you every day. When you step back from a narcissist, when you stop giving them the emotional energy they crave. What you may not realize at first is just how much of an impact our absence has on them. Narcissists live in a constant need for validation, attention, and supply, and they measure their world through the reactions of others. Your presence, your energy, your engagement, it feeds their sense of self. And when that disappears, it's not a minor inconvenience. It's a wound they cannot heal. The moment you withdraw is when the truth begins to hit them. Suddenly, they are confronted with a reality where they no longer hold sway over your thoughts or feelings. Your absence becomes a mirror, reflecting back everything they tried to hide, everything they tried to control, and everything they tried to justify. And because they cannot tolerate vulnerability in themselves, this absence feels like a personal attack. It's not about what you did or didn't do. It's about the fact that they are no longer the center of your world. You may have been giving your time, your attention, your care, sometimes without even realizing it. And for them, that was never just kindness. It was a system of supply. Every smile, every word of reassurance, every effort to smooth over conflict, it all reinforced the illusion of their power. When that stops, they feel exposed, they feel replaceable, they feel unmoored, and these are feelings they cannot manage on their own. They were counting on your presence to stabilize their world, and suddenly, that stability is gone. It's fascinating because narcissists are so skilled at projecting strength, confidence, and indifference. But when you step away, the facade cracks. You may notice subtle changes in behavior, the sudden need to reach out, the attempts to pull you back, the flattery, the guilt, the manipulations. This is not about reconciliation. This is about repairing the damage to their self-image caused by your absence. Every hoovering attempt, every attempt to regain your attention, every passive-aggressive message is a reflection of their own inner turmoil. Your absence also forces them to reckon with reality. They begin to see that their actions have consequences that they cannot control or erase. No amount of charm or explanation can replace the simple fact that you are no longer available as a source of emotional fuel. And while they may never articulate it in words, internally, they are aware that they misjudged you, miscalculated your resilience, and underestimated your capacity to remove yourself from the situation. This is why your detachment can be so powerful. It is a silent, undeniable signal that their strategies no longer work. It is a reminder that you have boundaries, that you have self-respect, and that you refuse to participate in the drama they once orchestrated. And it unsettles them because their entire identity is built on influence and control. When that influence is gone, they are left facing the stark emptiness of their own need, and they cannot tolerate it. They may try to fill the void with chaos, drama, lies, manipulation. But no matter what they do, your absence remains. It is the one thing they cannot manufacture, the one thing they cannot fake, the one thing that reminds them most vividly that they are not omnipotent. They realize, often too late, that losing your energy, your presence, and your attention is not just a setback. It is a wound that cannot be patched with excuses or charm. And the most powerful part of this is that your absence is not punish me. NT. It is not revenge. It is simply the natural consequence of taking care of yourself, of preserving your own emotional well-being, of choosing to disengage from someone who thrived on your energy without giving it back. In that quiet space, your independence becomes undeniable, and the narcissist is forced to confront the consequences of their actions in a way they cannot avoid. Your absence speaks louder than any argument, any confrontation, any explanation ever could. It tells them that you are no longer available to prop up their world, that you have reclaimed your energy, and that you are no longer subject to their manipulations. And in that quiet, undeniable reality, they know they messed up. Your absence becomes their undeniable truth, the mirror they cannot shatter, and the reality they cannot escape. One of the most fascinating things about narcissists is how quickly they rewrite reality when it serves them. They rarely, if ever, take full responsibility for their behavior, and the moment you start asserting yourself, the first thing they do is try to change the narrative. It's not because they suddenly care about fairness or the truth. It's because the truth is too damaging to their carefully curated self-image. And this rewriting isn't subtle. It's often so persistent and convincing that you can feel yourself questioning your own memories, your own perceptions. But the reality is simple. They know they crossed a line, and the rewriting is their way of coping with it without ever admitting fault. When you begin to assert boundaries, when you begin to name the patterns you see, it creates cognitive dissonance for them. They are forced to reconcile the person they pretend to be with the person they actually are. And that internal conflict is unbearable for someone who needs to believe they are always right, always competent, always in control. Instead of confronting the mistake, instead of owning it, they spin a story in which you are the one who misperceived, overreacted, or misunderstood. The narrative shifts, but their goal is always the same: to protect themselves from the reality that they harmed someone they claim to care about. They will label you as overly sensitive, as unreasonable, as incapable of seeing the full picture. They may even enlist others in this distorted version of events, subtly or overtly trying to convince people around you that your perspective is flawed. And the genius and cruelty of this is that it can be incredibly destabilizing. They want you to doubt yourself, to second-guess your reactions, to keep you trapped in the same cycle of self-doubt and emotional labor that fed their sense of control for so long. The truth is, they are terrified of accountability. Being confronted with your clear, unflinching observations forces them to face their own behavior, and they cannot tolerate the discomfort that comes with that. They cannot sit quietly with guilt or regret, because those emotions would require self-reflection, honesty, and vulnerability, things they are not willing or able to do. So they deflect, project, and reconstruct. In their mind, it's not about admitting wrongdoing, it's about survival. They need to maintain the illusion that they are blameless, that they are correct, that any fracture in the relationship was caused by someone else, preferably you. And yet, beneath all of your clarity remains untouched, unshakable, and undeniable. And that is the part they can never rewrite. One of the most revealing things a narcissist does when they realize they've crossed a line is what we call hoovering. You might know it as those sudden apologies, the unexpected calls, the messages filled with nostalgia or guilt, the attempts to draw you back into their orbit. On the surface, it can feel confusing, almost like they've had a moment of clarity, a glimpse of remorse. But that's not what's really happening. These behaviors are not about growth or reconciliation. They are proof that the narcissist knows they treated you badly and are desperate to regain what they have lost. Narcissists thrive on emotional supply. That supply can take many forms: attention, admiration, validation, even the simple reassurance that you are still invested in them emotionally. When that supply is interrupted, when you disengage, set boundaries, or remove yourself from their influence, it creates a panic that is often invisible to anyone who hasn't experienced it firsthand. That panic is what drives hoovering. the apology, the sudden charm, the nostalgic trip down memory lane. It's all an attempt to recover the control and supply that they've lost. What makes this so insidious is that it can feel very personal. They often frame their messages or actions in a way that makes you question yourself. Maybe they say, "I miss you," or "I didn't realize how my behavior affected you," or even, "I'm sorry if I hurt you." Notice that phrasing, "if I hurt you." That's not genuine accountability. It's a subtle way of acknowledging that you were affected without admitting full responsibility for their actions. And it works because it taps into your empathy, your desire for closure, and your willingness to see the best in people. The truth is, hoovering is a mirror of their own awareness. They know on some level that they overstepped, that they manipulated, that they hurt you. They may not say it openly, and they may never say it with words of genuine remorse, but every effort to pull you back in is evidence of that internal recognition. They are attempting to patch a loss that cannot be fully repaired because the trust has been broken, the boundaries have been seen and respected, and you are no longer available to be used as emotional fuel without your consent. Hoovering often comes at unexpected times, and it can be tempting to interpret it as a change of heart. But the underlying motivation is always self-serving. It's not about you or your needs, it's about their desire to feel safe, to regain power, and to reduce the discomfort of knowing they treated you badly. It's their way of trying to rewrite the past in the present, to convince you, and sometimes themselves, that the connection can be restored to the way it once was, before you saw clearly, before you reclaimed your independence. The impact of hoovering is twofold. On one hand, it demonstrates their awareness that they miscalculated. They understand that they cannot assume your compliance anymore, that their behavior has consequences, and that their supply is no longer guaranteed. On the other hand, it also reinforces your power. Every time you recognize the hoovering for what it truly is, every time you resist engaging, every time you maintain your boundaries, you confirm that the narcissist's misjudgment is permanent. Your clarity becomes undeniable, and their realization that they cannot easily replace you grows stronger. And here's the critical insight. Hoovering is a confession without words. It's the proof that they know exactly what they did, and it's a direct response to the loss of control they once took for granted. They don't want to face it consciously, so they act, they reach, they manipulate in subtle and sometimes dramatic ways. Every effort to pull you back is a testament to their awareness, a living proof that they recognize the damage they caused. The beauty of this dynamic is that you no longer have to respond on their terms. You are not responsible for repairing their sense of self or satisfying their need for reassurance. Your independence, your boundaries, your refusal to re-engage on their terms is what confirms to them again and again that they messed up and that they cannot undo it. And in that refusal, in that calm, consistent detachment, the narcissist is forced to sit with their own actions in a way they cannot avoid. They may never say the words, they may never acknowledge it openly, but the hoovering, every attempt, every message, every charm offensive, is proof that they know exactly the magnitude of what they lost. Your absence is not just a boundary. It is a mirror reflecting back their awareness, and it is the ultimate confirmation that their misjudgment cannot be erased. When you heal from a relationship with a narcissist, when you reclaim your sense of self and begin to live your life on your IR control, it forces them to confront their own failures in ways that they are ill-equipped to manage. What's fascinating is that your healing does not require acknowledgement from them. In fact, it often goes completely unnoticed by the narcissist, at least on the surface. But internally they feel it. They sense it in the absence of reactions that once fed them, in the lack of emotional turbulence they once relied on, in the quiet confidence you carry that they cannot provoke or diminish. Your healing is a constant reminder that they miscalculated, that they underestimated your resilience, and that they cannot reclaim the power they once held over you. Healing also shifts the power dynamic permanently. While they might have controlled your attention, dictated your emotions, and manipulated your perceptions in the past, your recovery removes that leverage completely. They no longer have access to your fear, your doubt, or your need for approval. Every boundary you set, every pattern you refuse to engage in, every moment you choose peace over chaos reinforces that shift. It is the most profound evidence of their misjudgment because it is not something they can manufacture or recover. They cannot force you back into dependency, and they cannot erase your growth. And here's the most important part. Your healing is not just about them. It is about you reclaiming your life, your clarity, and your well-being. But the irony is that, in doing so, you also send the loudest possible message to the narcissist without saying a word. Every day you live fully, freely, and unapologetically. You confirm that they crossed a line, that they overstepped, and that their manipulations failed. Their awareness of their mistake is built into the very fabric of your recovery. The healing process may be quiet, but it is unassailable. It is your refusal to be drawn back into the drama, your commitment to maintain your peace, and your ability to thrive outside of their influence. They can attempt to hoover, to charm, to rewrite the story, but your healed self is proof that none of it matters anymore. Your life, your autonomy, your confidence is something they cannot touch, and that is the ultimate reckoning. So when you look back on what happened and realize just how far you've come, understand this. Your peace is more than just freedom. It is undeniable evidence that they messed up and they know it. Every step you take forward confirms what they cannot admit. They lost control, they hurt someone they could not break, and no amount of manipulation can change that reality. Healing is your triumph, your armor, and your loudest, most unarguable statement.